Hey everyone, I'm Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com, and as we know, Z390 is the latest chipset launched from Intel, and it is here to stay. Now what we've actually got today is the ASUS ROG Maximus XI Hero Wi-Fi, and just to sort of give you an idea of where this sits, the Maximus 11 range of ROG boards is their highest sort of spec boards, and the Hero kind of sits about in the middle of that, based on price and also functionality. So let's jump in and see how it compares against other Z390 boards that are out on the market. Before jumping straight into the board, let's talk about what comes included in the box. So inside we can find that it contains a sheet of stickers, a coaster, driver CD, case badge sticker, Wi-Fi antennas, a SLI HB bridge, RGB breakout cables, 4 SATA cables, 2 of which are right angled, a manual, a cable mod voucher, M.2 screws, and a front panel Q connector. These are super useful as they allow you to connect up all your front panel headers outside of the chassis and simply place the connector on the motherboard, making installation a lot easier. So now let's talk about the board itself. It features an ATX form factor, and I'm pretty sure that you're going to agree with me. The styling is, well, pretty nice. So what you'll find is styling wise, it pretty much is consistent with what ASUS have done in the past with their ROG range. Everything kind of comes in a plain matte black fill with lots of kind of brushed metal and just really nice premium looking heatsinks on there. In terms of branding on the board, you'll see that it says Maximus 11 on the rear I/O heatsink shield cover. We also have the word Hero on the top heatsink, Republic of Gamers on the middle M.2 slot, and also the ROG logo across the PCH heatsink. In terms of RGB areas on this board, there are only actually 2 on the board. There is one up by the rear I/O and one down by the PCH heatsink. Now it would have actually been nicer to see maybe a few more RGB features on this board, but it doesn't mean that you can't extend them features beyond your motherboard. There's plenty of room for RGB headers, including addressable, and we'll go through them a little bit later on. And yes, they can all be controlled using the ASUS AuraSync software. Overall, I'm going to be honest, with the styling and design, I actually really like it. I think it looks premium, it looks professional, it looks extreme, and it looks like it really means business. So I guess we'll find out whether it does or not when it comes to the performance. In terms of the CPU socket, it includes a 10-phase power design, which is more than enough power for both 8th and 9th gen Intel processors. It's ample power delivery for overclocking as well, as we will see later on in this video. To deliver that power, it includes a single 8-pin and a single 4-pin power connector just above the CPU socket. In terms of heat dissipation, you'll actually find there's a lot of cooling on this board. So starting with the rear I/O, you can see that, well, we've got a heatsink that's chunky as balls. It's absolutely huge. And this kind of encompasses one of the heatsinks that goes around the CPU socket to the left-hand side. There's also one at the top with the Hero branding on there, and we also have one over the M.2 slot with the Republic of Gamers logo. Obviously the PCH heatsink itself, and then we have another M.2 slot which kind of converges from the PCH. You also have a further heatsink covering over the audio area, just to give a little bit more sort of cooling performance to the audio capacitors. In terms of memory support, you'll find that typically with a Z390 board, there are 4 DIMM slots in total. Now on this particular board, it supports up to 64 GB of DDR4 4400 MHz and beyond, with full XMP 2.0 support. It's worth noting that the DIMM slots don't actually have armor shielding, as many boards in this price range do. Obviously ASUS felt that this wasn't necessary, but you will find that actually in the middle of the DIMM slots there is a slight sort of brace, I guess you'd call it, a metal brace. So maybe this is kind of all it needed to have that extra stability that we've maybe seen on past boards from ASUS. So now I want to talk about fan headers and other connectors and headers on the board. So you may want to sit down for this one because there's a lot. So in terms of RGB headers, there are 2 addressable RGB headers and 2 normal RGB headers. There's also a single USB 3.1 Gen 1 port, 2 USB 2.0 ports, a USB 3.1 Gen 2 front panel header connector, a TPM connector, 8 fan connectors, 1 CPU header, 1 CPU optional header, and then 6 additional headers for chassis fans, 3 of which also double as pump headers. There is also an external fan header, some temperature and water flow sensors, and the usual reset and start buttons, as well as a memo key and ASUS retry button. The retry button basically allows you to hard reset your system without losing your BIOS settings, which is especially handy if you're overclocking. The amount of times where people forget to save their profiles, have to wipe their BIOS and go back in and try and remember all of them settings. This is just a simple way of retrying and maybe tweaking the voltage a little bit more so that it does actually boot. A really handy feature, and I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me that some of the features ASUS have actually implemented into their boards in sort of the last couple of years in terms of overclocking have really sort of pushed the boundaries for what everyone was asking for, and well, no one else actually came along and did. For all of your storage needs, there's 6 SATA 3 ports, which also operate in RAID 0, 1, 5 and 10 if you want to have either redundancy or that extra performance boost. In terms of M.2, as we said earlier, there are 2 M.2 slots on here. The top one supports 2242, 2260, 2280 and SATA and PCIe based modules, whereas the second one supports 2242, 2260, 2280 and 22110, but only supports PCI Express 3.0 X4 modules. It's also Optane ready. And as we mentioned earlier, there are 2 lovely looking heatsinks on here just to help with that heat dissipation if you are an enthusiast and find that your M.2 drive is maybe getting a little bit warm. In terms of our expansion slots, there's actually 3 PCI Express X16 slots, but only the top one actually operates at X16 speeds. If you're utilising the top X16 slot and the second one, it will operate at X8 speeds, and the bottom slot will always operate at X4 speeds. It's also worth noting that the top 2 also include ASUS patented Armor technology, which is essentially some shielding that goes around the PCI Express slot to give stability to the graphics card for heavier graphics cards, and also to stop things such as interference. There is also support for SLI, NVLink and Crossfire X. Now it is worth noting that if you are going down the multi-GPU configuration route, if you are actually utilising all 3 slots, then they will operate at X8, X4 and X4. On top of that, you'll also find that there are 3 PCI Express 3.0 X1 slots. So now that we've looked at the key specifications and features of the board, it's time to see, well, where do all these connectors and features actually apply? Let's look at the rear I/O and see exactly what we get. From left to right, there is a clear CMOS button, a feature that I've loved on ASUS boards for many years now, as well as a USB BIOS flashback button. There's a PS2 mouse keyboard combo port, 2 USB 2.0 ports, one of which is for updating and flashing your BIOS, a display port, HDMI port, LAN port featuring Intel's i219V gigabit LAN and has anti-surge LAN guard and ROG Game First technology. There is also 3 USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type A ports and a Gen 2 Type C port, as well as 2 USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A ports. There's 2 antennas for the Wi-Fi, which features the wireless AC 9560 dual band with Bluetooth 5.0. For our audio needs, there are 5 audio jacks with an optical SP-Diff port. In terms of audio, obviously there's so many different codecs and controllers out there, and ASUS have always prided themselves on using one of the best. They actually feature the ROG Supreme FX 8-channel HD audio codec S1220. It features an ESS ES9023P DAC and has gold-plated jacks, Sonic Radar 3, Supreme FX shielding technology. I mean, just reading that out, you can tell they mean business when it comes to audio, and that's probably the main reason why there's this heatsink cover over the audio, and you can see that they use gold capacitors as well, Nichicon if I remember rightly. So I'm actually really impressed with sort of what they're able to offer on the audio side of things, but how does that translate to performance on the rest of the board? Well, before we actually talk about the performance, I guess really we need to talk about overclocking, but this is where the disclaimer comes in. So all Z390 boards pretty much perform the same in terms of performance at stock as well as overclock. So the overclock that we got on this was pretty much what we got on every other Z390 board. We was able to push out i9-9900K, which is, I'm pretty sure you agree, a very hot chip. We were able to push that to 5 gigahertz at 1.35, 1.36 volts. Obviously you do get a little bit of V-droop in there, which I'm, pretty happy with. It's a good number, but it would have been nice to maybe get some slightly higher numbers with some more expensive boards. But I guess it doesn't all just come down to overclocking. Maybe that's the fault of Intel and not necessarily ASUS or some of the other brands out there. So now that we've got overclocking out the way, let's talk about the performance and run them glorious benchmarks. So pricing wise is one thing that I want to talk about. As I said in the start of this video, the Maximus 11 sort of range from ASUS ROG is kind of, you know, always the top spec, and the Hero actually falls sort of midway into that in terms of price and features. And this is actually very competitively priced. You can pick this board up currently on Amazon, and we will link to this in the description below, for £260 in the UK. Now in the US, this translates to about $290 plus taxes and shipping. I mean, looking at some of the other boards we have actually reviewed already, I'd say this is probably one of the best value for money boards out there, purely because you do get quite a lot of features in terms of that amazing audio, the fantastic heat dissipation, nice RGB features, the fact that you can put addressable RGB headers on there, good memory support, USB 3.1, Gen 1, Gen 2, Type A, Type C. It's pretty much got it all. The only thing maybe I would have liked to have seen is a PLX chip, so we could maybe get a little bit more bandwidth out of it, but that's not a necessity, and it does bump the price up quite a bit, as we've seen from other manufacturers. So overall, I'm actually really happy with this. There's plenty of fan headers on there, and I don't think anyone will really be able to max out this board. If you do find yourself maxing out the board, then ASUS have you covered there as well. They have the Maximus 11 formula and also the Extreme if you really want to go down that route. For the most part though, I think many people are going to be really pleased with the Hero. Personally, it's probably one of my favourite Z390 boards. Like I said, I'm really happy with it. I love the design, I love the features, and I love that price as well. Let us know what you think in the comments section below. Until next time guys, see you later. Bye bye.